Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for bringing us all together here at the beginning of your Sabbath. We thank you, Lord, for making this possible for all of us scattered wherever we are to be able to fellowship together. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to come to peaceful study of your holy truths. We thank you for the videos that have been coming out in Tahiti with Elder Tess. They've been really powerful and incredible. We thank you for those. And we ask that you continue to bless our leaders and our teachers and the work that they're doing and help them, because we know it can be exhausting, and continue to help us push through our daily lives, everything we have to deal with, and to still study these truths and to stay on track with everything that's happening. Help us to continue to grow in our knowledge of you and these lines and parables. And please be with us as the message is slowly swelling in our dispensation also. We thank you, Lord, for this incredible privilege and honor to be here. We pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Let me close the window. Okay. All right. So we read that long quote Wednesday night, which was very useful. And now we're going to get to the meat of the presentation that she was doing. So let's see here. So we read that quote, but here this first paragraph is the part of the quote that she's actually using, and I think it was from the first couple of paragraphs. Can you guys see this? Okay. So this is what she was saying. There is a terrible crisis just before, hold on. Let me actually, because I want to. So she was talking about slavery, and we're after the point where slavery is abolished. This is after the Civil War, and we're talking about the time period of the 1890s and late 1890s. And she was trying to look at if once that law was passed, that now there's no more slavery, if all of a sudden that whole spirit is gone. So she's going to look into that. So there is a terrible crisis just before us, through which all must pass, and especially will it come and be felt in blank. My mind has been much troubled over the positions which some of our brethren are liable to take in regard to the work to be done among the colored people in the southern states. There's one point that I wish to lay before those who work in the southern field. Among the colored people, they will have to labor in different lines from those followed in the north. They cannot go to the south and present the real facts in reference to Sunday keeping being the mark of the beast, and encourage the colored people to work on Sunday. For the same spirit that held the colored people in slavery is not dead, but alive today, and ready to spring into activity. The same spirit of oppression is still cherished in the minds of many of the white people of the South, and will reveal itself in cruel deeds, which are the manifestations of their religious zeal. Some will oppose in every possible way any action which has a tendency to uplift the colored race and teach them to be self-supporting. Okay. So the context of this paragraph is she is talking about the work in the southern states. What she is arguing is that you cannot share the gospel in the northern states the same way you would in the southern states. You have to change your tactics. If you're sharing in the north, you can be much more open with your thoughts. If you're sharing in the south, she says you have to, like Jesus, speak in parables, essentially. You have to cover up what you were saying. Then she says, why? About halfway through, she says, for the same spirit that held the colored people in slavery is not dead but alive today and ready to spring into activity. So it's the late 1890s. She's talking about the work in the northern states compared to the southern states. And she says in the South, they must be much more careful. They must be much more careful in the South because the spirit of slavery has never died. It's continuing through. It's alive today in the 1890s. She says it's ready to spring into activity. The same spirit of oppression is still cherished in the minds of the white people of the South and will reveal itself in cruel deeds. Those cruel deeds are the manifestations of what? In the paragraph she tells us, and this is the important bit that we've been following, and this is what she did in her last presentations, if you guys remember. They are the manifestations of their religious zeal. So you have slavery abolished here in 1863, but this isn't just a story of slavery. This is a story of how the United States views itself. It's a story of how they view equality. Okay, you guys weren't there this morning, but we started reading in chapter 2 of Peril of the Republic of the United States of America, and it was really interesting the way he was laying out the what Percy said basically was that test, the Civil War, was the test for the United States institution. You made a declaration that you said you were going to follow through with equality, and now this is your test to see if you're going to do it. It's kind of like we say we love Jesus, but then you have a test of lines and prophetic messages to see, well, do you really? You know, if you guys have been watching the Tahiti presentations, they've been really incredible. So anyways, it's interesting how it's all tying together. She says that they will oppress the colored people by enacting cruel deeds. They will reveal their heart essentially in the manifestation of cruel deeds, and those cruel deeds are a manifestation of their religious zeal. So when it comes to this issue of slavery, what is slavery? Why are they enacting slavery? Not just slavery, but the racism that continues throughout. It's because all of this is just a manifestation of religious zeal. The oppression of the Black people by the white is a manifestation of their religious zeal. It's directly connected to their Protestant beliefs. What does religious zeal mean? If you were to go to Romans chapter 10, verse 2, Paul is speaking about the Jewish nation. Okay. Chapter 10:1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. And then verse 2. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. So what did Israel have, or the original glorious land? They had a religious zeal, but it was not according to knowledge. It was that word for knowledge, discernment. It was a religious zeal without discernment, without a correct understanding of God, essentially. So Paul is identifying that is ancient Israel. And then we come to this time period and we find in Protestantism what they are doing through this history, through the history of slavery, through the history through the history after slavery, as they continue to oppress, is connected directly to their Protestant beliefs. If we were to go back into history, we can identify that. I have a few times in studies quoted from a book written in 1864, a book written in the South. It's titled Southern Slavery in the Bible. In that book, what do they argue? The North must give up the Bible and religion or adopt the views of slavery. Through this extensive book, they're going to argue that their position on slavery is a biblical mandate. When we look at...
So Adriana, that's Ellen White talking about the book? It's her book she's talking about?
No. She uses a book written by a Southern Protestant minister in the time of slavery. I forget, so she brings it up and she actually quotes directly from that book in the France camp meeting where the issue with pants came in. I think it was presentations 39 and 40, where she was talking about equality and slavery, where she brings up that book and she quotes directly from it.
Are we talking about Tess?
Tess.
Okay,
Tess found a book written by a preacher in the South in slavery times.
Okay, now I got it. Thanks.
That preacher was giving... Hold on, let me close this door real quick. So that preacher was giving arguments for slavery, and he was saying that slavery is based on the Bible. It's a biblical truth. If you want to give up slavery, if you want to abolish slavery, then you have to turn your back on God. So that's the type of mindset and understanding they had, right? And you can totally see clearly why today they would tell you the same thing. If you think it's, you know, I'm not going to go into details with this, but they they look at certain groups of people who in the Bible says, you know, what they're doing is bad or whatever, and they say, well, these people are going to burn in hell. You can't tolerate these people. The Bible says these people are horrible people, you know, and it's the same exact thing today. It's racism isn't culturally acceptable anymore, but that one is one that they still use and fight over. So it hasn't changed. They're just taking the excuses out because they don't have discernment, so they're reading it like a plain thus saith the Lord and whatever interpretation they have, or they're doing methodology wrong. Because in that slavery video, those equality ones, the 39 and 40, she says that they were doing line upon line on an issue that they should have been doing progressive studies on. So equality throughout the Bible is a progressive issue. You cannot do line upon line when it comes to equality because it's progressive. And she said, if you want to do Alpha glorious land and then Omega glorious land, and have Alpha glorious land, which was ancient Israel, where they were a special people and they were supposed to be separate from the Gentiles, and the Gentiles were heathen and you're not supposed to mingle with them, and you're allowed to have slaves and make them slaves, and you want to make a line upon line direct application to our time, well, now you ended up on the wrong side of the issue, because that one, equality, is a progressive issue. So she was making that point, which I thought was interesting. So they have their own way of studying the Bible, but it's not based in accurate methodology. So anyways, that's the book that she's referring to. I don't remember if she said the name of the author, but this is the name of the book that she's quoting or referring to. She quoted it in that France video. So when we look at this history in the world, and the world looks at this history, how do they view it? This is all just politicism. This is politics between northern states and southern states. This is all about economy. This is all about political power. This is all about whether or not there's going to be state rights or large expensive government. It's all seen as political issue, but it was not a political issue. It was a religious issue. It was an inaction of religious zeal of Protestants. We find that religious zeal didn't end with the abolition of slavery. Ellen G. White is identifying it as a living thread in the 1890s, and she says it's going to come back, which we find did happen in history. So in the 1890s, they decided to bring in a law. It began in one state and then it spread. This law was called Equal but Separate. They placed it into law. What they're saying is black equals white, but that they must be separated. You must separate black from white. You must have separate schools, hospitals, colleges, spittals or fountains, water fountains, I think. Doors, everything. A black person would enter a building through one door and the whites through another, always separated. When they say equal but, what do they mean? Can you have an equal? No, they destroyed the equal. So you have the law of equal but separate, introduced in the 1890s, and this was the beginning of government-ordered segregation by law. So segregation became law in the U.S. first in one state and at the federal level. Is that? Does anyone else want to read this paragraph?
I can read. Right there, so we find, right?
What happened? Where did it go?
Sister Adriana, can you mention what this is?
It's down below. So we find, right?
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question. What was your question?
Yeah, I just asked Sister Adriana if she can mention what study this is of Elder Tez's.
This is, I think it was the last one in admin Australia before the camp meeting. It was Donald Trump, a man of his time, or a man for his time.
Right. Okay, so we find that mindset, just as Ellen G. White identified, it continued through. That law of segregation continued until 1951. In 1951, a collection of Black families with little children decided that they wanted their children to have access to the same education as the white children. So these families came together and they decided to sue their local government, their local district, to allow their Black children access to a white school because equal but separate. There was no equality. The white schools were funded and the Black schools weren't. So they were never able to reach the same levels of education, of job opportunities, of anything on any level. So they said if they wanted their children to have a future, they were going to have to send them to a white school that is funded by the government. So in 1951, there begins a court case, first in the district level, and it was known as Brown versus Board of Education, one of the most famous court cases in US history. Brown versus Board of Education. They sued their local district and they lost because of this law, because it was in law that they had to be segregated and Black and white children couldn't attend the same school. They lost it in the district level and took it to the Supreme Court. In 1954, they won the case. The Supreme Court ruled that Black and white children should be able to go to the same school. It ended this law of segregation. This segregation began to be dissolved. You can mark the end of segregation beginning here, but it took time. It took time because there was such opposition, particularly in the southern states. Many of us are aware of what happened in Little Rock in Arkansas, where for a year the Army had to take the little Black children and lead them into the school. There are these famous photos of these 9 children being escorted into white schools by the US Army because the white population was so opposed to the intermingling. The connection I want us to see is how this impacted Protestantism. It's something that has been in existence in American history since it first arose in 1798. This enaction of first slavery and then persecution, segregation, was all part of Protestantism, religious zeal. They saw slavery as a biblical mandate from Abraham, really through Canaan, and then through Abraham, through the nation of Israel who owned slaves, through the New Testament, the book of Philemon. They believed it was God's order that they should be a slave-owning nation. They justified it by such ideas as that they were taking the gospel to the heathen nations by putting them into slavery and forcing them to attend church. But this concept continued through this history, but the mindset of Protestantism never ever stopped. So when this Supreme Court rules against segregation, what is the mindset of the evangelical leaders? Here's where we introduce one prominent evangelical leader, Jerry Falwell. There were others, but he was the key leader of this history. Jerry Falwell saw this court case that ended segregation, and he said, if those Supreme Court justices and their associates had known the Word of God, had desired to do God's will, I am confident that the 1954 decision would never have been made. He preaches that from his pulpit in Lynchburg, the facilities should be separated. When God has drawn a line of distinction, we should not accept to cross that line. So he is preaching from the pulpit that this end of segregation is a violation of the Word of God. This is a manifestation of what? Religious zeal. Because his mindset about segregation, about the separation of Black and white, is all about as all a manifestation of this, and this religious zealotry within Protestantism never died. It continued through history. It is this ending the segregation that starts to, you could say, mobilize the religious right to America.
Falwell continued his sermon. The true Black person does not want integration. He realizes his potential is far better among his own race. He announced that integration would destroy the white race eventually. In one northern city, he warned that a pastor friend of his was already living next door to an interracial couple. He sees this as starting to happen not only in schools, but now they're also starting to live next to each other. He sees this as the destruction of the white race. And it's the same thing today. They feel threatened. This escalates through the 1960s. 1960s, the civil rights movement within America. Jerry Falwell in this history attacking Martin Luther King Jr. as a communist subversive, a left-wing propagandist. So already he is starting to attack the civil rights movement. After the civil rights movement, he wasn't getting his way within the civil rights movement. He starts to pull back from making political statements about race. Around the 1960s, he goes quiet and instead he forms the Lynchburg Christian Academy. In 1966, he forms his academy and it's described in the local newspaper as a private school for white students. So what he has done is instead of forcing the political issues, he decides to sidestep politics. He's going to form a private school. The reason that he's forming a private school is that only the public schools were forced to end segregation. But he and other leading evangelical Protestants in the South start to create Southern private schools where because of their private status, they can enact segregation and refuse access to Black students. And that's how they're going to make sure that at least in the Christian communities in the South, they're able to enact segregation, which he would say is his religious right. I know I know Ellen White has quotes about worldly education and stuff, but this just, I mean, Adventists, you got to admit, kind of did the same type of thing to try to separate themselves off from humankind, made their own little schools where it doesn't help the kids anyways. But I thought this just reminds me of that because we did the same thing. Isn't it?
So true. Yeah, true.
And then, so now they're segregated in those little schools, and then when they come out into the real world, they have all these different kinds of people they don't know how to talk to and be around. Anyways, or what they see there completely makes them not believe in God anymore. So there's that.
God is really having to reteach us, help us to unlearn what we know and teach us the right way to think about heaven.
Yeah. Because the schools, they had a good purpose, but they were supposed to be intended to teach people how to be kind and help fellow man and bring them closer to Christ. That was the whole purpose, not to teach them to be with their noses stuck up in the air, thinking they're better than everyone else. And obviously Satan would attack that. Wherever there's children, he's going to work the hardest. Anyways, oh, another thing I wanted to say. I was looking into the civil rights movement today and the suffrages movement with the women's rights movement. And they both kind of started in 1848. And it actually, the word suffrage was originally to do with slavery, I think. But it grew out of that because right after the amendment was put in allowing Black men to vote, and you know, because they were all working together, but then women were now excluded because you put the word man in there. So then it transferred over and it became a word that the women's rights movement were using. And so in 1869, then you had women's rights go in. But I thought it was really interesting because think about how this message opened up in our movement last dispensation. Every time Tess went through the Bible to explain women's rights, she said, you're not being consistent. And what was women's rights tied in with? With slavery.
Right.
of
Equality with slavery. Yeah.
So the same way it came out in the US, they came up together, and then one was based on the other. So if you're going to give them rights, we need to have rights too, because we're people too, you know? So then it's the same way how it opened up recently in our movement. And I thought it was interesting that those two were coupled together
It
in
makes
history as a,
sense. It makes
yeah,
sense because equality is equality and it's supposed to be per person, not per race, not per gender. It's supposed to be per person.
exactly. Yeah. And the same type of arguments to say that, you know, this person doesn't deserve rights because they don't know us, or I don't know how they're, or I don't even know what, I mean, I can't even imagine what would be a good argument for slavery against the people, you know, but it's equally as idiotic as it would be, well, women aren't capable of learning too much books. Like they're not, you know what I mean? Ridiculous stuff like that.
Right.
But it's the same type of arguments that they would use for both. And
Right.
the white men would look at both classes like children. They would treat them like, you know, children that they need to either punish when they're being bad, or, you know, tell them they're wrong when they're being saying silly foolish things, that, you know what I mean? Like they literally looked at them like children, grown
Like
human beings,
property.
like property. Exactly. So I just thought that that was an interesting little coupling that happened in history and in our movement. Anyways, at the beginning, this is successful. This academy, Christian community academies that they made to sidestep segregation. So at the beginning, this is successful. This attempt to circumvent integration. He later calls it Liberty University. It's one of the largest Christian university in the U.S. still today. It's Liberty University, but beginning the early 1970s, the government started to react against these private segregated schools, and the government wrote to them because there was more than school. Because there was more than school, particularly beginning, oh, because there was more than one school, particularly beginning with Bob Jones University, and the government told them that if they want to segregate the private schools, that's fine, but they lose the tax exempt status. Now they have to pay taxes. This made Falwell furious. In response to this, he said, in some states it's easier to open a massage parlor than to open a Christian school. This made him extremely angry that they would lose their tax exempt status all because of segregation. This is what began to unite these religious leaders together. Bob Jones University. So their greed is, you know, equal on their hatred of other races. So Bob Jones University, Liberty University, Pat Robinson, Jerry Falwell, Paul Weyrich, they all started to unite over this issue in the early 1970s. What they decided is if we cannot sidestep the government and enact our religious beliefs driven by our religious zeal, then what we need to do is to influence the government, to take over the government. Paul Weyrich was a leader in this work in the mid 1970s. So, 1971, the government tells them that they need to end not just segregation, but once they allowed Black students, they forbade interracial dating. So, they still don't want to let go. They want to keep as much as they can of what they believe. They still had laws in place that were racist. So, from 1971 through the 1970s, they begin to come together. They have meetings, they start deciding on their agenda and how they're going to be able to impact the government and to bring the government back around to what they believe is a biblical mandate. Does anyone else want to read? Starting right here.
Paul Weyrich said they
Hold on, sorry. There you go.
Paul Weyrich said they must form a new political philosophy, package it in non-religious language. So it has to look secular. It has to look political, not religious. When they achieve political power, then they can recreate the US. He terms this as a holy war. We need to lead the nation back to the moral stance that made America great. We need to yield influence on those who govern us. American evangelicals had long steered clear of politics, but that all changed in the 1970s with the advent of the moral majority. In 1979, they formed what was known as the moral majority. They had understood in the history previous that it was not their role to impact politics, but because of this history, there is more connected to this history. You have women's rights, you have gay rights, and you have civil rights movements. There are three different rights movements in this history. It was particularly this issue of ending segregation that mobilized them. American evangelicals have believed that they should steer clear of politics, but that all changed in the 1970s, and they formed this coalition, the Moral Majority. A professor of religion at Dartmouth College, Randall Balmer, for really the first time in any significant way, evangelicalism becomes interlocked with the Republican Party. They are not just working with any politicians. Once they begin this political movement, they are targeting one political party, and that is the Republican Party. They had become interlocked, and you see an alliance develop between Ronald Reagan and the evangelical leadership known as the Moral Majority. The Moral Majority is politically active for 10 years, from 1979 to 1989, and their first agenda item was to get Ronald Reagan elected. They succeeded with that in 1980. 1980, they get Ronald Reagan elected. That was step one. This is straight from Jerry Falwell. 1980, they get Ronald Reagan elected. 1988, they get George Bush elected. This is step two. They have united with the Republican Party. They have placed two presidents in power that they believe will enact their political agenda. First Reagan and then Bush. In 1989, their 10-year movement dissolves, and Jerry Falwell says the religious majority, the moral majority, are now firmly in place. They will continue to impact politics for the generations coming.
So you can think of it as in two sections. In the 1800s, mid to late 1800s, you had civil rights and women's rights. And then women's rights got some concessions. But then you had a second wave of women's rights issues come up. And I think it was because of workplace hazards and different other things. I don't remember 100%. But so you had in the 1800s, women's rights and civil rights, which is slavery. And then in the 1900s, you had civil rights, women's rights, and gay rights, all three of them. But the one that irritated them the most, because it was the problem that was, immediately affecting them, was desegregation, because it was being forced onto them. And they had such a long and interesting history with that. So it's easy to split that up. I was trying to look at some timelines for all the civil rights movements for women's rights and gay rights and everything today to see how it all worked, but it's definitely interesting to look at. So I want to quote one sociologist, Martin Weisbrot. I think I Googled it, and I think that is how you spell it. So he argued that his movement, the Moral Majority, is a patriarchal protest movement, and it's intended to reestablish the leadership and the authority of males and their families in governments and in religious institutions. So it's a patriarchal, which means the man side of it, protest movement in response also to the feminist movement. So, quote from article. So this is from that article. Scholars such as sociologist Martin Weisbrot have argued that movements such as the Moral Majority were patriarchal protest movements intended to reestablish the leadership and authority of males and their families in government and in religious institutions. The emergence and popularity of the Moral Majority came at a time when there were growing efforts to establish the rights of women, people of color, and the LGBTQ community. Moral Majority thus represented the conservative religious reaction to those efforts. The moral majority drew primarily from white fundamentalists and evangelical Christians, although it also included conservative Catholics and mainline Protestants. It thus mobilized a broader conservative religious and political coalition than just white conservative evangelicals. Throughout its 10 years of existence, the moral majority became a decisive and powerful force within conservative politics and the Republican Party. Falwell and the moral majority worked with other equally conservative evangelical and fundamentalist Christian leaders, such as James Dobson, Tim LaHaye, Pat Robertson, Phyllis Schlafly, and the like. Ultimately, this broad coalition of conservatives, mostly white Christians, came to represent the religious right. It has had an enormous impact on both the Republican Party and on public policy more generally since its founding. So one thing I wanted to mention, because I was Googling around, they used to be called fundamentalist Protestants back in the day. That word evangelical, I'm not sure if this article that I found was correct, but what it was saying is that once terrorist attacks, they started to call those fundamentalist Islamic terrorist people, and they started to adopt that word to describe terrorists. The Protestant community decided to switch from using the word fundamentalist Christian to evangelical. And evangelical was also happening during the time where they were going through that born again movement. I forget the details of it, but I know I was reading about it at some point. Anyways, so I thought that was some interesting history. So beginning with particularly Reagan, the Republican candidates recognized the power of the religious right as a voting bloc, and they routinely visited evangelical and fundamentalist institutions such as Liberty University, Bob Jones University, etc. It was the efforts of the moral majority and other important organizations within the religious rights, such as the Equal Forum and the Focus on the Family, that led to the defeat of legislation such as the Equal Rights Amendment. That was an amendment that was supposed to be made to the Constitution, declaring that women are equal and should have equal rights. Let me change that. They defeated that, also to block legislation favoring LGBTQ plus rights. Similar issues echo today as well, presented in the guise of religious freedom for Christians. I want us to remember that statement. We're going to finish with it. Similar issues echo today. Falwell's move into politics details his shift in theological perspectives. He moved from a separatist stance that taught that God controls everything, including politics, to one that required human action to fulfill God's intended destiny for America. So prior to this history, there was some understanding that God controls politics and we will stay out of it. Once all this begins to be enacted, his stance changed, and how he sees it now is that God is going to control politics through his people, or the Christian right. So we have to be active if we wish to fulfill God's will for the nation. Falwell died in 2007. His efforts to combine his religious and political commitments have fallen to his son, Jerry Falwell Jr. Jerry Falwell Jr. is made after the exact same material as his father. He has continued all of that conservative Republican thinking to the extreme that he has encouraged and even advocated that students at his own university carry guns. He built a shooting range on campus to demonstrate his approval of the Second Amendment rights, or his interpretation of it. Okay, so recent scholarship argues that the white Christian America upon which the religious right remains dependent is in decline. Yet in 2016 election, 81% of them voted for Donald Trump, making Jerry Falwell Sr. and his legacy as important a figure for the Republican Party as Ronald Reagan. We talked about this history, 1979 and 1989, and we focus on the Catholic Church, John Paul II. It's easy for us to slip into our Adventist conspiratorial and we secret alliance that wasn't that secret, and we pictured John Paul II, There's probably a black pope and some evil people behind him. They're probably into some cult action. He's secretly united with the US, which the irony of this, I don't know how we thought it was a secret alliance when it was on the front cover of Time magazine. It wasn't exactly a secret. For the fall of the Soviet Union, and we make this all about the action of the papacy. There's a place for understanding John Paul's role in this history, but that has not impacted our present reform line to see Donald Trump where he is today, as much as the rise of Jerry Falwell and the moral majority. So we've been too blind to see Protestantism in this history. We are focused to Catholicism. When we have done that, we have missed this history. If we miss that history of what brought them to 1989 and Reagan and Bush, we're missing the history of what is leading to 2019. Okay, that's fine. So here it's very blurry. Can I fix that? Let's see if we make it smaller. Where is this? Okay, it's a little better. But you have the moral majority. You have that 10-year period right here. Okay, I'm going to use the eraser to point because it's easier to see. But you have this 10-year period right here. You have Jerry Falwell, Trump, political connections. This we're going to come to. She quoted a few articles in this presentation. The Word and PDF file that I have, if you look at it for this presentation, it's like 45, 60, something in there. How many pages? 59 pages long. And what I did is I added those articles. There's 2 regular size articles in there. They're actually here. What happened? So this one is Revisiting the Legacy of Jerry Falwell Sr. in Trump's America. So this is the one we just read. This is this section of it. You have another article, which is under The Secret Cables, Fear of Immigrants and the Tea Party, How the Financial Crisis Led to the Rise of Donald Trump. And I think this one was loosely based on what she was saying, because she was doing that thing where she paraphrases, and I couldn't find the exact article. But this is the big one that was important to read, and this is something that you'll hear a lot of the media on the left quote. This is this article that was written by someone, I think in the New York Times or Washington Post, I don't remember which one. But it was this huge article. It was the first thing that was ever officially written about the life and the type of character of Donald Trump, the first formalized message, if you can think of it that way, of who they are, him and his father. And it was published in 1979, and it was done in 2 parts, and it was very thorough. It was very thorough. And what it detailed is mostly just their business dealings and how they operate as a business and as father and son. And she's going to quote this, but these are really long. This first one I had to type by hand. You're not going to find it on the internet except for like a picture of the actual newspaper. And I typed it out, so it's in the PDF file. You can just read it there. Otherwise, you have to really squint.
Thank you for taking the time to find that.
It seemed important. From what she was saying, it seemed like an important thing. So reading through it, I mean, man, and then after I read this, a bunch of news things that I watched regularly, when they mentioned Trump, they've gone back to this article, this 2-part article, as showing proof of racism and sexism early on in his career. They've referenced this article multiple times. So I would, and she suggested too, this is a very good one to read. So it'll be.
So when you say someone is quoting it, so you're saying the left, not the Trump supporters, but the liberals are quoting it, correct?
Yes. So like Ari Melbourne, MSNBC, I've heard other those contributors on the talk whenever they have news and they ask people about their opinions in their little roundtables, whatever they have them do. But when they're talking about Trump and his backstory, they reference this article a lot because this is where they get a lot of their proof from. This guy was a not hound dog, but he was like a wolf. Like he sniffed him out. And I think she's going to talk about it, or I heard it somewhere else. I don't remember how or where, but no one was paying attention to Trump. He was just some random, another rich kid in New York kind of thing. No one was taking him seriously. But this guy who was known to get some really big scoops on some, like, he wasn't afraid basically to poke the bears of New York, the people who most people wouldn't touch because they're afraid of the repercussion. This guy wasn't that kind of guy, this guy who wrote this article. So he went after him, and he wrote this, and as he was writing this about Trump, and Trump found out that he was going around asking people about information, he started to threaten and bribe this guy writing the article about him. It's insane, and it's in this article if you read it. I was shocked, man. He has not changed one bit. I mean, everything you want to know about him is right here.
That's
it has
amazing.
not changed. It's got everything you want. So it's in that in the notes if you guys want to go through and read it. We're just going to quote a small little bit of it, but if you guys want to read it, it's going to be in there. Anyways,
it's kind of amazing, and if you want to be a certain kind of person and you want to say certain kinds of things and you're going to do it openly, why you got to go threaten to people to go report what you did and said? You did it publicly anyways.
Well, what this was actually doing, because what happened is Donald Trump and Fred Trump were getting sued.
Yeah, I know.
And
Yeah, I saw some of that on their, with all their buildings and not letting blacks in and not letting women in.
Yeah. So they were in the middle of legal litigation issues, and so he couldn't have that type of thing coming out. That was one of them. And I don't remember what else was going on. But it wasn't just that. There was another deal that he was doing with someone in politics. I forget what his name was. But they were basically like, that guy was in politics working for representing the state of New York in some way. I don't remember how. But they were using him to get what they wanted when it came to real estate issues and the land and all of the leasing and whatever you wanted. So if you want to learn about bribery, your master teacher is going to be Trump. And did you guys see, I didn't know Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father, his middle name is Christ. I didn't know that. I didn't know that could be a middle name. That was so weird. Anyways, it's weird family and weird. So here you have this line. With the articles and everything, this transcript ended up taking so long that I gave up and just took pictures of the board and put them in here. So I'm sorry, but it took like multiple weeks for this one video. But she has everything you need on there. There's more on here that we haven't talked about yet, but you can see Reagan, you can see Jerry Falwell, that 10-year period. This is what we've been talking about so far. And the issue is that I think Christine read it on Wednesday when she first started, American exceptionalism. And this is the idea that Americans have of themselves, right? That we're a special nation. Why else does everyone want to come here? We're so cool, or we're so great. And they think that these people who are coming here are threatening that, or whatever race is threatening that, or the ideas of this group is threatening our idea of who we are. But their idea of who they are is incorrect, and that's what they're not seeing. But that's what she's kind of going through here. So does anyone else want to read these couple paragraphs? Okay, I'll keep reading.
I can read.
Okay.
Our reform line, I will draw down below 1989. If we were to look at 1989, we have two presidents, Reagan and Bush. So we identify two presidents in 1989, Reagan ending his term and Bush beginning his. So 1989, the beginning of our reform line. What brought us to 1989 was the 10 years of the moral majority, where the morality of the so-called majority decides to enforce their morality on the minority through politics. You can trace Jerry Falwell through this history. Jerry Falwell, beginning in 1979, is going to endorse Ronald Reagan in 1980 and help him be elected. So 1979, Jerry Falwell forms the moral majority, and he throws his political power behind Ronald Reagan, and in 1980 helps bring this about his election. I want to go a little bit faster through our history because I want to come back and I want to bring Donald Trump into this story, connect him to these waymarks, because really we are looking at two different subjects. When we come to our history, particularly from 2014, we began to see the Republican part and the evangelical right, but you also begin to see Donald Trump. The two powers begin to become one, but really you can trace them all the way back into the 10-year history. We will do that. So if you skip through a little bit more quickly, we come to 1996, and Jerry Falwell again goes on a tour of America. It's really a political tour trying to encourage pastors to become politically active. The problem that they are facing in this history is that their views are quite radical. Right back from this history, they are pro-segregation. They are against women's rights. They are against gay rights, and they are against Black rights or the civil rights movements. They are against all of those things, and they have had to change their tone as they have gone through this history and been losing the fight. But when they have Ronald Reagan elected, by the time he is in office, he is not fully enacting their vision of what they want done. Reagan, to them, it was good, but it wasn't good enough. For Jerry Falwell and George Bush was the same. Then you have Clinton, the Clinton presidency, and you start to see their goals undermined. Clinton, early on in his presidency, trying to allow homosexuals to join the army, and he was torn apart for that. So particularly the Clinton years. But then you come to 9/11. I will just review this quickly because many of us are familiar with this history. Let's see. Is there more? See, 9/11, you have the terrorist attack, and how does the evangelical right respond to that, including Jerry Falwell? They blamed the 9/11 attack on America's decadent acceptance of feminism and homosexuality. They are becoming less outspoken about the race issue because that becomes less politically correct, but they still have two others to target: feminism and homosexuality. The daughter of Billy Graham, she says that we have abandoned God as a nation. We backed away and he is withdrawing his favor from us. That's why God allowed 9/11 to happen. So she says this is punishment of God because of our immorality. She says that as a nation, we have shaken our fist in God's face. We have told him to get out of our politics, out of our schools, out of our businesses, out of our marketplace, and off the streets. God has backed away. Her brother has voiced very similar thoughts. Both are children of Billy Graham, particularly noted Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. Soon after 9/11, they asserted on US television that an angry God had allowed 9/11 to succeed because the US had become a nation of abortionists, homosexuality, secular schools and courts, and the American Civil Liberties Union. They say this is just the beginning of the judgment of God.
So, really quick, I was reading another article about, I don't remember, this guy went to interview this very popular writer down in the South who was chronicling this strange move and shift that's been happening with the evangelicals in the South. And he said that in our time period, right, Donald Trump's election and everything, the reason why it happened, there was two main things that evangelicals used and were basically, I'm sure the way that it worked was, you know, the patriarchal part of it got, you know, they get, what is it? They feel like their status is in danger. But the two issues that they used to mobilize all of the evangelicals was abortion rights for women and gay marriage. So those were the two issues that they used, that they wanted whatever president that they pushed for to come. They wanted laws prohibiting those two things specifically. Those were their big goals: gay marriage and abortion. And you have that happening right now. I don't know if this article was right. I don't know who posted it. I think it was in the WhatsApp group about ectopic pregnancies having to be reimplanted, because otherwise you're going to face abortion murder charges. That's impossible. You can't do that, and you're going to take it out because otherwise the woman's life is in danger. But there's been a lot of states putting and pushing laws limiting these things, and they've been winning, and it's been gearing up to another Supreme Court case battle. Gay marriage, that's going to be another thing that's going to be up. And with the judges that are in place now, I mean, you can already see where this is going. But those are the two big issues, and I think those issues are going to be really important, and we have to look into that. There's also another bill, an equality bill of some kind. I forget the name of it. It was like an equal rights bill. It wasn't the one for women. It was the one for LGBTQ, saying that they were equal and had the right to equal rights. And that one was shot down, I think. It was trying to get passed, but I don't think, obviously, Mitch McConnell isn't going to allow it to go anywhere. But that was another issue that they're having. So there is a lot of information to sift through, but there's a lot of really interesting information that builds on this. And it's pretty incredible how, I mean, they're like military minded. And when you look at the evangelicals and their mobilization efforts, they're like a one-track mind ready to just push through anything to get what these things done. It's pretty incredible. So, you read up to here, right? I think so. So when there has been natural disasters such as New Orleans, again, conservative ministers, here Kevin Swanson said, Jesus sends the message home. Unless Americans repent, unless Houston repents, unless New Orleans repents, they will all likewise perish. He started targeting these particularly with Houston, is homosexuality. They had a homosexual mayor. He is saying that is why they came under God's judgment. Or the mayor was pro-homosexuality, sorry. So this has been their thinking all the way through. There are really three rights movements that have galvanized them: women's rights, gay rights, and civil or black rights. We see that today. I want to quote someone more recently. Earlier this year, there was a school shooting, and this is on Fox News, which can also mark in 1996. So you see a coming together in this history of really three things: Fox News, a media stream, the Republican part with the evangelical right. So you have the Republican Party. That's what that's supposed to be. Sorry. So Fox News media stream, or the conservative media stream, Republican Party, and the evangelical right. This is really the story of their union. In a school shooting recently, one Republican politician, he was actually the governor of Arkansas in 1996, Mike Huckabee. He went on Fox News and said, the reason that there is school look, something like this is the fault of our culture and the fact that we have a culture in which we say there is no God. He says that is the common denominator. It's not about the fact that everyone has guns. It's not all of those issues. It's our culture that says that there is no God, that there is hate inside the heart, the loss of morality. So again, they're citing whether it's 9/11 or school shootings or natural disasters, it's all judgment of God because of a loss of morality or taking God out of the state, which is what that culture of no God is, right? Isn't that what they're referring to? Is that we're saying that there is no God? And the way you say that, I'm assuming they're referring to the fact that Obama took him out of state, basically. Anyways, in this history, we go from a Reagan presidency, a George Bush presidency. In this history, we have Clinton, and then we have George Bush Jr. Through this history, you find that they're struggling to enact the political change that they had wanted to. You come to the history of 2008 and their worst nightmare, an Obama presidency. But I want to talk about our waymarks. I'm going to highlight our waymarks. They have begun back here, but they are not achieving the political change that they had wanted. Even within our own Republican candidates, these are the waymarks we place on our reform line. 1989, 9/11, 2014, 2019. And within here, you have 2016 and 2018. This is between these two waymarks. So 2008, you have an Obama presidency, but you also have the beginning of a financial crisis, and that financial crisis bottoms out or reaches its fullest extent in 2009 when this financial crisis devastates the U.S. economy. You have the beginning of movement within the U.S. That movement is known as the Tea Party movement, which for some reason I keep hearing more in the news lately. I don't know why, because are they still a movement or did they disband? I think they disbanded, didn't they? Or are they still a thing?
I don't know.
Because whenever they talk about it, they talk about them in the past tense. Because I remember when they came in, but I don't think I've heard about them as being a thing. Anyways, it's a response to that financial crisis. The Tea Party movement is a Republican movement within the Republican Party, but it's more right-wing. So this financial crisis brings together the particular extreme right-wing elements of the Republican Party and unites them. I want to quote, this is from the Washington Post, quoting, this is a paraphrase, I couldn't find this article. One important group blazed the path Trump followed, the Tea Party movement. In substance and style, Trump realized the agenda that the movement, those Republicans, forged from 2009. What distinguished Tea Party Republicans in the House was not their views on fiscal issues, but their views on social and racial issues. Never mind, I have that, okay. House members most aligned with the Tea Party were more socially and racially conservative than other Republicans. It arose as a fringe wing of the Republican Party. So this is from that article number 2 that I showed you guys earlier. So the Tea Party movement rose up. Okay. And I think she quoted all of this. That's why it's in here. So Santelli's rant heard round the world. Scott Reynolds Nelson, a historian who studies the politics of American financial crises, said that the Tea Party movement is precisely the type of fringe group that often rises up in the wake of an economic calamity. He said that after major panics, conspiracy theories can flourish, and elevated extreme politicians who seek to paint their political opponents as the root of the pain felt by voters. political parties always sort of had plausible deniability when it comes to these fringe organizations, but these fringe organizations have a great deal of power, Nelson said. The fringe groups are the things to look at if we want to understand what our future will look like. And then another target, immigrants. Trump blamed the financial crisis on the secretive insiders who run the government, but he also had another target, immigrants. Trump staked his campaign on a hardline immigration stance, complete with mass deportations and ban on Muslim immigration and a border wall paid for by Mexico. He also claimed that Mexico was sending violent criminals, including rapists, to the United States. Ever since his political rise, many have credited Trump's appeal among white working-class voters to economic anxiety. Struggling with unemployment and stagnant wages, the common narrative is that voters liked the populist anti-Wall Street rhetoric Trump used in his push toward Washington. That economic anxiety is tied to racial animus, experts argue. Resentment against bankers wasn't the only line he picked up on in his campaign for president, said Geoffrey Kebeservis, director of political studies at the Niskanen Center, a Washington think tank. No one is claiming immigrants had anything to do with the financial crisis, but that was an even more effective line of attack he had, Kebeservis added. So this right wing within the Republican Party movement, the Tea Party movement, comes together in 2009. What characterizes them is conspiracy theories. This is Obama birtherism. So it's not just about economic policy. This is also about social, racial issues and conspiracy theories. You see in that history that Donald Trump begins to question Obama's birth, saying he wasn't actually an American citizen, saying he was born in Kenya. All that conspiracy theory. He found the more he questioned it, the more he became popular. There was a response. So out of this economic collapse comes a populist fringe movement in the Republican Party. It has its basis in conspiracy theories and race and social issues, particularly regarding Obama. It begins to pin the blame for country's economic war on immigrants. Sorry, I'm reading it was reported that the conservative wing of the Republican Party has basically shed the Tea Party moniker. Okay, so yeah, I thought it fell away because they only ever refer to it in the past tense. Otherwise, I think you would see it constantly. So this is all a repeat of the history of Nazi Germany. When the economy of Germany collapsed in the late 1920s, early 30s, what did Hitler say? How did he use that? He used it for his own political agenda, saying that the economic trouble within Germany was the fault of who? The Jews, the immigrants. He used conspiracy theories to wield political power and to manipulate the people. Indeed, the financial crisis made Americans more comfortable expressing views that were anti-immigration, according to a study published in the International Migration Review in July. Post-election survey data suggest Trump's appeal was mostly due to a fear of cultural displacement among white working-class voters. A more recent study in the which you guys remember, everyone's like, they're taking our jobs, right? There was that whole issue. So a more recent study in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences also challenges the simple economic anxiety narrative. The findings suggest that white Christians and male voters turned to Trump because they felt their status was at risk. So it's the same like the civil rights movement. It's the exact same issues that they are struggling with in this history when they are finding their status at risk, 1979 history. So in 2012, you see this really, while you have all this happened in the Obama years, and then their worst possible nightmare for the Republican Party, something they swore they would never allow to happen. Hold on. It's Obama's re-election. So now those fringe elements within the Republican Party come together and they're essentially saying, whatever it takes, whatever they have to do to make sure that the next president elected is not one after the cut of Obama. They want a conservative Republican, and from 2012 forward, you have Steve Bannon, what he would call the Judeo-Christian West, begin to mobilize and prepare for the next election cycle. We have done studies and seen Steve Bannon's work in this history. It's really the mobilization of the Republican Party in 2012. They begin to work with a company that we have discussed before at some length, SCL and Cambridge Analytica. Those companies are attempting to use those disillusioned, particularly white Christian male population, to use those race and social issues to their advantage to manipulate the public into voting for after their own agenda. We have talked about those years, how Obama was separating church from state, but 2014 really is the turning point. In 2014, Steve Bannon warns. He is speaking actually at the Vatican. He is a very conservative, strong Catholic. He says in the Vatican, we are at the very beginning stages of a brutal and bloody conflict. Outright war against jihadists. He talked about Islam, but also the secularization of the West. Socialism, the left, atheism. He says that we're all also at war with them. And this is all the beginning of a populist revolution. I want to go, and you can have insights. If you guys remember that one morning devotional we had, we looked at that video where it explained the theology of Bannon, and you can see it through three movies that he made. What's going on in his head in there. So I want to go back into history now. Go back to this history and talk about how Donald Trump fits into this story. We find him hitting the exact same waymarks. In 1979, a journalist, Wayne Barrett, so this is that big article we were talking about earlier. In 1979, a journalist, Wayne Barrett, wrote the first detailed examination of Donald Trump. It was 2 articles, one article really in 2 parts, and he, for months, worked on this story, conducting a detailed examination into Donald Trump and his business practices. It wouldn't surprise us that those magazine articles were not positive to Donald Trump. So the first detailed examination of Donald Trump happened or was released in 1979. He had come in that examination to a couple of conclusions. Before we get to his conclusions, I want us to note how Donald Trump responded to this investigation. As Trump began to note that someone was preparing to write articles about him and was investigating him, Donald Trump began to call Wayne Barrett. He handled this journalist in 2 different ways. First of all, he threatened to sue him and destroy him. Second, he said, if you write about me favorably, I'll get you an apartment. You don't have to live down where you live in Brownsville, essentially a poor district. I will get you an apartment in one of my units. So in Wayne Barrett's words, he says, Donald Trump had the bribery and the threat. He had the carrot and the stick. This is how Donald Trump is working with the media from his very inception, either threatening or bribery. So this is quoting from the 1979 article. Wayne Barrett says, in this first of 2-part series, I'll examine the character and history of Trump's Brooklyn base. In the second, I'll trace the details that led to his extraordinary acquisitions of the 3 Manhattan properties. So he's going into his business dealings and the government negotiations that are turning them into personal windfalls. So he has government negotiations, like we said. Each history, the Brooklyn Empire, the Manhattan purchases, and the government contracts, is a tale of overreaching and abuse of power. Like his father, Donald Trump has pushed each deal to the limit, taking from it whatever he can get, turning political connections into private profits at public expense. The very first investigation, what he is identifying is that Donald Trump works through abuse of power, and he's using his political connections to create a private profit. He inherited those political connections from his father, who had powerful connections to politics. He has taken those connections that his father had and he has used them in a way that is described as overreaching and an abuse of power. It's a long article. It goes through all the details of that, but it's an interesting read. His other 2 points that he investigates and notes in these articles is how Donald Trump leased his properties. When you went to an apartment that Donald Trump owned and you wanted to rent an apartment and you gave the receptionist your name, if you were black next to your name, they would put a little C for colored. You went down the list. They did not want to rent any of their apartments to black families. So the first issue he had was race. He was sued. They were actually sued by the government for this issue, him and his father, that they segregated race within their apartments. They did not want to lease apartments to black families. That's first investigation that is released in this report. The second, if you were white and you wanted to rent an apartment, they needed to assert your income to tell whether you could afford or not to lease the place. When they would look over your income, they would only count the income of the male of the household. So if the female worked, it was not counted towards whether or not they could afford that apartment. So there's no chance, no hope of a woman being able to lease an apartment based on her own job, whatever that is. It had to be counted through the mail. So it's actually later in 2000, hang on. Elaine, is this part 2? What you just posted?
It's an article from the Atlantic.
Oh, it's not about, okay.
This stuff. Yeah. If anybody hasn't read it yet.
Okay, where was I? It's actually later in 2011. Donald Trump was asked whether or not he would hire working moms. He said, a working mother is not giving 100%. She is giving me 84%, and 16% is going towards taking care of children. So even in 2011, he's open about how he sees women in the workforce. That's 1979. In 1988, he hints for the first time that he has political ambition. This is in an interview with Oprah Winfrey. He is complaining of the same things in that 1988 history that he complains about in 2016. American allies aren't paying enough. We're being ripped off. The Japanese are living in the lap of luxury while we protect them. All of the same thinking that he used in the election. Oprah says to Donald Trump, what you are saying sounds like political presidential talk. Donald Trump responds, he probably wouldn't run for president, but he wouldn't rule it out entirely. He is tired of American allies taking advantage of them. He says America would make a lot of money if he was president. He says the way America has been is not the way it would be under me, believe me. So it's the first hint at political ambition, and the host of that show picks up on that. In 1989, his first cover on Time magazine. So I actually want to go to 2 news articles, 2 journalists who wrote where we are in 2019, and they tried to pin it back. How did we get here? How did we get to this situation in 2019? Those 2 articles took different approaches. One said it's all because of 1989. The second said it's all because of 2014. So I want to look at the first that spoke of 1989. I don't think I ended up finding these articles, so if you guys want to try to hunt them down, you can totally do that. So this article states, the present situation arises out of a past that we are too quick to forget, misremember, or enshroud in myth. But where we are today in 2019 is because of past choices. Different decisions back then might have yielded different outcomes in the here and now. Donald Trump ascended to the presidency as a consequence of many choices that America has made over the course of decades. Although few of those were made with Trump in mind, he is the natural result of the choice America has made. Where did Trump come from? How can we account for his presence as commander-in-chief and leader of the free world? They begin that journey where it all began in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall. As the Cold War wound down, members of the Washington Smart Set declared that the opportunities not presenting themselves went beyond the merely stupendous. Indeed, history itself had ended. The US is the world's sole superpower. So this article is talking about unilateralism in 1989 is what led to Donald Trump now. That's the connection that it's making. So liberal democratic capitalism was destined to prevail everywhere. There would be no way except the American way. In fact, the ending of the Cold War should have caused them to reflect about the many mistakes, moral compromises that America made from the 1940s through the 1980s. But they had no interest in revisiting their mistakes, certainly not in remorse or contrition. Instead, they became controlled by extraordinary hubris or gadol and a pattern of a reckless behavior informed by an assumption that the world would ultimately conform to the wishes of the indispensable nation. No, that's not what I wanted. Hold on. We'll just make this. Okay. So what's the issue in this history? American exceptionalism. The end of the Cold War, what's driving them again is this concept of American exceptionalism, the one world superpower. They have to define what that looks like. They made the wrong choice in the slavery history, and they made the wrong choice in our history at the end of the Cold War. Reagan, really more than anyone before him, took that point of American exceptionalism the farthest, and he called America the city on a hill. He took that from a centuries-old speech about how America is this exceptional nation, the city on the hill, looking over the world. 1989, we could discuss Trump there. He is on the cover of Time magazine. It's also, if we want to trace him through this history, in 1989, that his wife accuses him of rape. That is a pattern that we see continue through. The next time we find him accused of rape in 1996, but it was his ex-wife in 1989. 1996, he turns 50. He bought the Miss Universe organization and immediately began to attack the weight of the women who won that Miss Universe pageant. That's something people still discuss. He called her an eating machine and just destroyed her because of her appearance in 1996. You can trace his behavior through that history. In 1996, he also unites with an American company in a plan to extend his business practices into Russia with the idea of building a hotel there. That plan falls apart, but people go back to that history and trace how he has interacted with Russia. In 2000, he began his first presidential campaign, and that fails. He pulled out of that race. If he had been successful then in 2001, maybe he would have been the US president right back then, but that ends in failure. I want us to note how he responds to 9/11. This is still a subject again today. He used 9/11, that national disaster, as fuel for his personality cult. He still speaks about it today, how he was there on the ground, how he saw people fall from the building, even though he was 4 miles away in Trump Hotel. He has used this event in the recent months. This concept of the role he played as a first responder at 9/11, none of which is proven. Large amounts of which is actually disproven, but again, we see the connection with the same way Hitler worked. Hitler used national disasters to fuel his personality cult, and Donald Trump has done the same thing all the way through. I think it was the bombing at the Reichstag, right, that Hitler used. So he also said Muslims celebrated and danced as the towers came down. Another, again, conspiracy theory, personality cult. So in 2009, we begin to see a change. First of all, he joins Twitter, which changes politics as we know it. Second, he becomes a Republican. He joins the Republican Party, and why does he join them? It's in response to Obama, a black president. 2009, he joins the Republican Party. Before this, he had given more political donations to the Democratic Party than the Republican. But this begins to change in 2009 to 2010, until in 2012, he throws his financial support behind the Republican Party more than any year. 2009, he connects with David Bossie. David Bossie is a prominent Clinton conspiracy theorist. He worked against the Clintons when Bill Clinton was president, and he has more than hardly anyone else fueled the conspiracy theories around the Clinton family. He admits that was a right-wing agenda and that was done intentionally by the right-wing Republican Party. He was actually fired from his job as investigating the Clintons in this history because he was doctoring evidence. 2010 and 2011, we could go through those years and see the escalation. David Bossie introduces Donald Trump to another major player, Steve Bannon. So these people start to connect. So 2010, Steve Bannon is introduced to Trump. 2011, Donald Trump conducted preliminary talks to consider another bid for president. He meets with evangelical leaders and they tell him it is not yet the right time. Bannon tells him it is not the right time. In late 2013, Donald Trump met with Republicans to discuss a possible run for governor of New York. So December of 2013, Donald Trump is starting to think about entering politics. The first step that he is thinking would be as governor of New York. The concept written up in this document that the Republicans give to him is that if he starts with governor of New York, it's the first step to what in a couple years' time become a presidential bid. So he's already beginning here with presidential ambition. January 2014, a small number of political operatives met privately with Trump in Trump Tower. The chairman of the Erie County Conservative Party called that he brought the necessary papers for Donald Trump to form an exploratory committee to run for governor. Donald Trump was considering the idea. I want to go into the details, but what Donald Trump asked of them, what he asked of this man particularly, is that he wanted all the political opponents, the other people running for the same position, to drop out of the race. He told him that they could not pave the path for him straight to the governor's office. The fact that he even thought that that's something they could do, it just blows my mind. He would need to run as an ordinary candidate. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. So this made him angry, and he pulled out of the race for governor. 2014, he makes the statement on Twitter, "While I won't be running for governor of New York State, a race I would have won, I have much bigger plans in mind. Stay tuned, will happen." I would suggest in 2014, he is already planning his political career. It won't be as governor of New York. He has bigger plans in mind. Stay tuned. So in 2014, you have the work of Steve Bannon that begins to do with the Republican Party in Cambridge Analytica. This is where we begin to see the different agendas unite. We talk about Fox News, but also the Republican Party, but not just the Republican Party, particularly the right wing within the Republican Party, the Tea Party movement. It begins to unite with the evangelical right. So you have those three again, the same three that are uniting again. So they're finding in 2014 forward their ideal candidate. They're also in 2014 beginning to enact that work under Cambridge Analytica, where they're already sending out political messaging. That political messaging is over those same issues of race, gender, and what the United States is meant to look like. Another article, this is written in 2017. He says, "A year into the president's first term, I've been trying to answer about the question, Donald Trump. When was America's emotional table set for his election? Trump has been driving the American political conversation in one way or another for a while now, ever since he came down that escalator in 2015. But I think the real emotional buildup to Donald Trump started before he appeared on that escalator. It all starts in 2014. People have many theories why Donald Trump won: racial resentment, economic anxiety. But in 2016, Donald Trump turned the campaign into something deeply personal for all Americans. A referendum on our national self-worth. Were we really great, or were we indeed of a greater improvement? Trump brought out our sentiments of fear, of loathing, and hope in a way wholly unfamiliar to our sober, straight-laced politics. Of course, the results of the 2016 election can't be traced to just 1 year. There are many events. The sentiments of people grow and change year over year. But a series of events can also surface strong feelings in a group of people and feed the idea that a change is afoot, that American self-presumed exceptionalism has atrophied. Okay. Again, it's the idea of American exceptionalism. Perhaps that's why the themes of fear and mortality and morality. Hold on. I just want to do this real quick so I don't forget that this is quote. Perhaps that's why the themes of fear and morality that hovered over the 2016 election made some sense with 2014 in the rearview mirror. Sorry, can I ask a question real quick? Have you guys been watching the Tahiti presentations by Tess, or even just the camp meeting from Australia with Parminder and Tess?
The camp meetings, but I haven't got to the Tahiti stuff yet.
I've been listening to the Tahiti ones.
Okay, because have you guys noticed that they keep saying that FFA is making a mistake because they're saying that it's a moral test, but we're saying it's a prophetic test? If you notice from everything the evangelicals are doing, they're also saying we have a moral test. That's why God is punishing us, because we're failing our moral test. And there's certain morals laid out in the Bible that we're not following. So literally, externally, it's the same issues that have to do with morality, right? You have externally, they're trying to focus on morality, and internally, if you try to focus on morality, you're going down the wrong path. And Parminder kept saying this. And then number 3, there was a number 3 or number 4 I watched today, and number 7. And she says again, like, it's not about the food you eat or what you're dressed like. Those are morality issues, and they're going back to that. Our test right now is a prophetic issue. And FFA apparently, and I didn't know this, they're saying now it's for sure 2019 is the end. It is the morality test. If you're not perfect by the time this year closes, you're done. And so I don't know what's going to happen to them, because they're going to very quickly realize January 1st, 2020, that none of them are perfect. And I think they're going to fall apart. Like, I don't see how they're going to last, because you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what, that just doesn't
like
make
what
sense.
might go on through the individual minds, because the individual minds might be thinking that, but they could actually wind up being convinced that they're perfect regardless. I don't know.
That's crazy. I don't know. But yeah, our test right now is a prophetic test, because we still have an intercessor. So it can't be the morality test.
Yeah, and she laid it out pretty clear. There was still an intercessor on October 22nd, 1844, that it was a prophetic test.
Yeah, because Ellen White, she wasn't perfect from 1844 to 1915 when she died.
Yeah.
She still had an intercessor. So it doesn't, and they're moving Panium and the cross and everything. They're moving everything in such a way that just seriously makes no sense anymore.
That's exactly what happened in the Millerite history.
It's true.
It's exactly what happened. They started setting new dates, moving things around, and they'll each come off and do their own thing. And who picked up? I think, if anybody else picked this up, Mr. Garmeyer. Is Mr. Garmeyer Theodore in Anna Phillips, FFA, or Jeff?
I didn't catch who Anna Phillips was, but I think it was Theodore for Garmeyer, wasn't it?
That's what it seemed like to me when I was reading it myself, and what he was saying.
Was Alice
That's what
Jeff?
I thought too.
I don't know, but that's the spiritualism that they're talking about. But I had someone message me on Facebook that they require my email because they have a new understanding of prophecy. This is some other random person saying that um 2024 is going to be Panium, and they're moving everything ahead a bunch and changing everything around, and they're trying to get a hold of FFA also, and they want, help so that they could spread this message to them too. There was this other one in another WhatsApp group who was saying that there's this sister in Africa who had visions of things and stuff, and so she's the chosen one for something. I mean, there's I can't even. I don't know what's happening, but I'm like, that's. I didn't even think of that, Elaine, but that is so true. It is exactly like Ellen White's time. Literally, all the random crazy stuff. Satan is literally trying to pick off any person he can with any craziness he can.
And
It
the
is so.
dreams and visions, and I was just reading something, and I'm not going to remember where it was at. Maybe I'll try to remember what I was searching earlier before the Bible study, about people saying that they are the only ones, and that only God can give light. So if you're listening to man, I'm paraphrasing poorly, but that there would be one person that would thinking, there was several different things. One person would be thinking that the light would only come through them, and they have the light. We're gonna be seeing all of that, and that's what FFA is doing, and we're repeating that history.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really. I don't think we even realize what incredible times we live in.
Hey, think about it too. When it comes to 2014, when did we first know the message of time and Sunday law situation?
Way after 2014.
So what does that mean for the Levites? Their Sunday law started, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be the same because remember, it starts off as a whisper, their message, and it
Right.
gets louder.
And they'll get a big loud cry, midnight cry, their loud cry, just before Panium.
Yeah.
Like we did. I was thinking about that because, hey, we didn't know any of that stuff, right? And
Yeah.
mercy in bringing us through. I just pray. I pray every one of us. And the thing that scares me, I don't know, worries me, is that people fall off the path all along the way, and that there are false prophets in the church until the very end. And it's like, I'm every day, Lord help me, that it not be me. Look at what when they're at the table, and Jesus said that one of you is going to betray me, and they were all saying, Lord, is it I? Lord, is it? That's how I feel like, because we wouldn't really know it. You know what I mean? I feel like I battle back and forth between, okay, we can trust in what we know, but then you wind up in this trap in your own mind of self-confidence and going back to, no, I can only trust in the Lord. I feel like I go in these circles. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that.
I'm there. It brings me to tears thinking that I could be Judas.
Right. And because and not just whether or not it'd be me, but I mean, it could be, we're looking at how few of us there are around the world. And I've just been praying for the priests daily.
Yeah, I've thought about that too, and I think social media is going to end up being a huge part, because whoever we share with locally that we can get to face is going to end up telling someone else, and it's going to spread in a huge way. But there's the United States. There's so few of us for the entire country.
Yeah.
It's
well, I did study the Sabbath school tomorrow. I was working on the notes a little while ago, and when they go to Antioch, it's after Pentecost when they, or after the close of probation on the Jews when they go to Antioch, and it's talking about there were certain prophets and teachers that were in Cyprus, which is an island, Cyprus and Cyrene, that first went to Antioch and were sharing the gospel, and then I can't remember how it said it, but then Barnabas was asked to go up there. And
Hello?
are you there? Can you hear me?
You broke up. Cyrene is in Cyprus, but then what about Barnabas?
So, well, never mind. I was looking on the map on Cyrene. It's in Africa, if it's the right one, but that's what I found.
Is it? Because I don't think they went to Africa. They went to Cyprus and then they went to Turkey.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a map for tomorrow just in case. But anyway, so then they go, those certain prophets and teachers, it says, went to Antioch, and then Barnabas winds up going up there, and I can't remember how it said it. We'll read it tomorrow. Barnabas goes up there, and he's amazed to find how, if I'm going to paraphrase it, how advanced they were there. So when they came in, so I don't know who these prophets, well, it says who the prophets and teachers were, but it wasn't, they didn't seem to be affiliated with the church yet, if I understood it correctly, because then they call somebody from the church, and Barnabas gets a calling to go there, and he's amazed at the advancement of these people and how quickly, it was like the harvest was ready by the work that was done in advance. Do you know what I'm saying?
I've been noticing that too as I've been reading back in that history. I'm like, it's not any different, and it wasn't different in their time either, because before it even went out from the Jews, you already had the people who have kind of been in that region, the Samaritan woman, everyone, the what is it, the legion, the centurion, all these people, they had already started to understand some of these things. They were paying close attention. The Jews weren't, but everyone else was.
Yeah. So they were plowed. They were plowed.
They
They had seeds sown, and they had rain, and they were ready for the latter rain.
Yep. So the other thing I wanted to say is, I don't understand how you would gravitate to what FFA is saying, because from what I've seen, from what these lines, from what Elder Tess and Elder Parmenter have been showing us, God literally made this as easy as possible for us. We're not having to plow or rain on anyone or anything. We literally just show up in their harvest when their minds are set and they have an idea of what's happening. We don't have a moral test right now. We just have to accept this prophetic understanding of equality, which for most of us is like, duh, like, why didn't I think of this before? It's absolutely, and when you see what God wants to do, he's literally saying, you didn't realize, but there's all these people suffering. And most of us, I think the ones that actually made it through to this end were people who are like, wow, we don't want other people to suffer. I don't care what my status in life is. It's not okay for other people to suffer. And so God is just trying to say, hey, just so you know, there's these people suffering. Pay attention to them and care about them and be interested in what is happening with them. That's literally it. God literally understands how hard we're struggling with the planet we live on. He made this as simple and as easy as it could possibly be for people in our situation. He is not willing that anyone should be lost. He did not make it rocket science.
Yep.
And there's people who didn't have as much understanding in these lines as everyone else. But people, even with limited understanding in the lines, understood the equality question.
Yeah. Yeah, I had some going back and forth with Larry earlier, and we talked. I shared something with him. I don't remember what it was, but on a compare and contrast, not what we talked about this morning, but something different. It had to do with Trump's behavior and how bad it's gotten. And I said, yeah, it's like that's what's actually doing the work on the people in the world. Is it had to get black and white, and we're like in really dark charcoal. You know what I'm saying? Going really dark charcoal. And it's that is actually waking people up, because when you're listening, when you're watching things and it's like, you know, you don't really see the bad. That's what the latter rain is doing. It's ripening both crops. It's ripening the evil and the good. And so the evil side, or I want to say the Republican side, they're being, and the conservative side and the moral majority and all that, they're being more brazen. And Donald Trump has brought out that more brazen boldness, and just to sit there and talk bold face, witness after witness, evidence after evidence, and just act like it wasn't even said. And it's insanity. So people got to be seeing that, you know what I mean? And catching on that God had to make it black and white so that people will wake up and see what is happening. So it's compare and contrast. And then when it's that dark, that's when the stars are going to shine the brightest, when they go out there. And you know, who did the work in the time of Christ? Who the disciples didn't do the laboring. They went and reaped the harvest. Who planted that crop and prepared that harvest?
God did. And did you notice that in Paul, when he went to the synagogues or wherever he went to preach the message, he said he would speak like all day or all night about what his understanding of everything is. And it said some listened and some didn't. And that was it.
Yep.
The ones that listened, bam, join the movement. The ones that don't, walk away. That was literally the harvest, what it looked like.
So he's preparing us to go in and reap the harvest that he plowed, he planted, he watered, he nurtured, and he's preparing us. But all these issues that have come up, equality and racism, sexism, all these things, we had to understand rightly to go out and reap that harvest. Otherwise, we would cause harm.
Yeah, we so are not deserving of this incredible privilege he's given.
No, I know I'm not.
Yeah, and he's like, they're not gonna dumb down their understanding of equality for you guys. You guys have to catch up to them. And so here we are. And aren't we all happy about it now, understanding that all this stuff was going on, and now we know what's actually happening, and so we can stand on the right side?
Amen. I don't know.
Isn't everyone?
For those that are on Facebook, I ran across today an article and posted it on. It was on the plantations. I don't know if anybody saw that, on plantations, where the plantations back in the South, where they do tours and stuff, and it was talking about weddings, and there was a criticism about it, trying to romanticize the plantations for their big mansions and all that to be for weddings and stuff like that. So then I got in and I was reading the article, and it was talking about people that are angry that people are starting to use the plantations for tourism, you know what I mean? To go in there for tourism, and they're really politicizing it by talking about slavery and showing the history of slavery. And it's interesting to read because there's people in there that are angry that they would do that. Who would be the ones that are angry that you're bringing, because they're making a comparison in showing videos of Black Lives Matters and things like that in these tours. And so who do you think it would be that's going to be angry that they would do that? Got to be that conservative line.
Right.
The same people who didn't want that statue of what was it, Robert E. Lee taken down.
Yep.
Right.
Because they said, but this is our pride of our history.
Yep. I was like, wow. I posted it, and I put some of the quotes from Ellen White about slavery is alive in America, that same spirit, and it's coming back or never left.
Isn't that part of their movement, is that they want to rewrite history?
Yeah.
They had that group of women, I forget what their name was, but there was this group of women in the South who went around deliberately forcing schools and libraries to have their accepted versions of historical events when it came to the Civil War that was pro-South. And they excluded from all the schools and the libraries in the South books that actually explain the events as they did happen. And their biggest work was erecting monuments everywhere to the dead soldiers of the Federation to honor them and respect them. And they did this huge work, and you have all these children that grew up in those schools in the South because of these coalition of females. I don't remember what they're, daughters of the South, daughters something. And all these kids grew up not knowing what actual history is, because they, I mean, I want to say they whitewashed it basically, and they made it pro-Southern instead of, you know, what it actually was. And so you have all these kids that are proud of Southern heritage. So now they don't understand what actual history is. And you have someone come in, try to point these things out, they get angry.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yeah.
But this is how evil and insipid what they did is.
Yeah.
But the equality thing though, all of us, there was that quote, oh, if I could find it, where she says, if we could see from end to beginning like Christ does, and if we could see where the results of where he's leading us are going to be, we would all be happy and willing to go there, because it's for the best, everything he's doing. We might not understand it at the time, but we don't have his eyesight, and he's leading us to a place where we are all happy to be there if we could just see what it looked like. So now that we're on the other side of this, I think we're all pretty happy with, you know, understanding these things. I know I'm ecstatic because I didn't, you know, at least I'm not spouting horrible things that are actually causing someone else's oppression anymore on the conservative spectrum with their ideas and philosophies. At least that much. And now we can try to work to help other people, which is, you know, what I think why we're still here, because that's what we want. We want to do something better for other people, not just live, because we're not supposed to live just for ourselves. Our number one job right now is to learn how to not live for ourselves, but to live for other people, to help. And that's the whole point.
Amen. Yeah.
So I think if we could just stick to this and always remember, if something happens, we don't exactly understand it right away, just stick to it, because where God is taking us, we will be the most happy people we would ever be if we could just see like he sees.
Amen.
Where we're headed. So I am so thankful to be here right now, and those presentations coming out in Tahiti and the camp meeting ones were so good. Oh, we're so lucky. So, where was I? I think it was here.
We might have to cut you off unless everybody wants to go on, but it's helpful to me if we don't.
Oh, okay. No, that works out actually. So let me put a mark.
I was supposed to, Christine was going to record, and I totally we even talked about it, Christine and I, an hour before we started. And then I went ahead and said, oh, I got to start the recording. Didn't even think about it. I just did it out of habit. But it puts me up later to finish it all.
Nope, we're good. We got the place saved and everything.
Okay. And I noticed the schedule, if you're working on the schedule for what's coming up on Wednesday and Fridays going forward.
Huh? What?
Tony was looking for the schedule for what's coming up, what we're continuing to do on Wednesday and Fridays.
It's on the website under schedules.
Okay. Well, you're going to continue this one maybe Wednesday?
Yeah, we don't have that much of it left.
Okay.
But so I still need, that's not schedules. So under schedules, this is the December one. Is it on here? Yeah. No, that's November.
Yeah, that's the schedule she meant, is what you have for that, where you put everybody's names in. And when so she knows when she's up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I still have to work on it because no one is signing up.
Okay.
She's the only one that signed up for one, so I'm kind of worried now.
Adriana, maybe tomorrow morning you can go over it with everybody. If you want to add my name, I would be willing to do number 8 and number 20.
Okay, let me write this down.
And maybe you can bring it up tomorrow while there's a lot of people, and see if anybody else will sign up.
And I think Tony wanted number 10. Yes, Tony wanted number 10. Tony, number 10. Okay. All right.
Are you going to do the two in between? It's so the one after yours, Donald Trump, is there's under new management and the dangers of moving the second angel's message. Are you going to do those two before the camp meeting, or are you just going to skip those?
I totally forgot about those. But what do you mean number 20? There's no number 20.
There is a
Is there a
number
number
20.
Oh yeah, there is, because they added 3 more. Okay.
Yeah, number 20 is World War I with Tess.
Okay, that works. I'll update this, but okay.
Yeah, it goes all the way up to I guess 20 is the last one, and then Robert volunteered for the two after, not two of them, but then there's two after Terry Lambert. This is after number 20, and he had volunteered to do the external, right? Freedom or slavery external.
Yeah, but that's not a part of this one. That's just the 2 separate things that Terry Lambert put out, which is fine, but he's doing that for the December camp meeting.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. He wanted to do that one instead of the one.
Okay, gotcha.
Who said that?
What?
Did I hear that wrong? I thought someone said hello.
Yeah, I thought I heard something too.
Anyways. Okay, so if everyone can just kind of look at what is on this list, see what you want. We really need this one. Number 1, they were not of us, Elder Tess. Number 2, 2014 to 2019, a review of the latter rain. These
I
two
still have
would be.
my mic on?
Huh?
Oh, good. I still have my mic on. I'm gonna look real quick while I'm working on the after we close up and getting the video posted and everything. I'm gonna look at that first one and see if I can't work it in, because I already have the transcribed notes from Allie for my number 3.
That'd be awesome.
Huh?
That would be awesome, but it would be Wednesday unless we did whatever I have left in the study. Let me see.
That's probably way too soon for me then.
Yeah, this doesn't have much left to it. So
Adriana, what if you finished the one you're doing, but also read that article on Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Let's
do that.
Yeah, because it sounded really important, and so it couldn't hurt, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If someone wants to help me though, because Wednesdays I'm like driving home really late. So if someone else wants to start the reading, it's already on the website there, ready to go, whoever wants to. So the paragraph we're at is this one, which is, let me see where that is. It's all the, this is what it starts with. We scroll. Oh.
It was somewhere on page 21, I think, but I can't remember the exact paragraph.
It's the first big paragraph, because one paragraph finishes. On here it says it's page 22, so it's the first big paragraph on page 22. No, 21, you're right. Page, no, 22. Oh, come on. I should have put page numbers on this because it's not helping me right now. I think it's page 21, yeah, but it's the first big.
Read a few of the words of the first paragraph, of that paragraph.
It's all those events of 2014 that paved the way for 2016. That's the first sentence right here. Why did it do that?
Okay, yeah, that's on page 22. And I could, barring memory loss, which is really easy, I will be here on Wednesday and I can start that reading.
Okay.
But I wouldn't mind if you texted me and say, hey, heads up, Christine.
I'm going to take a picture of this. And that way we know where we were.
Adriana,
Yeah.
what I'm thinking I can do, because the Sabbath, the 21st,
Uh-huh.
I won't be doing one. You guys are doing something. So you might be able to put me on for one of these on that Friday.
Oh, because that's the camp meeting.
Yeah, the camp meeting will be Fridays. That's right. So we won't do anything Friday. But I might be able to pull one off and have it ready for
Wednesday?
Huh?
The Wednesday or the next week?
Either the Wednesday or the following Wednesday.
Okay.
I'll work on it. I just took the notes, grabbed the transcribed, thanks to Christine's help on the thing I was missing, for the first one, and I'll save them and send them out if somebody wants them. And then, but if you can kind of calculate, I want a shorter one though. You know what I mean? If possible. I don't remember if they were how long they all were.
All right.
Number one is only an hour. Because if you can kind of map out where that Wednesday would fall and which one that might be, then I can get started on it. I already have, like I said, I already have the notes from Allie for next Sabbath's one. I just have to put them all. I haven't put them together, but I have the raw transcript. And so, so between now and after the camp meeting, the 21st, then I could probably have something.
Okay.
That week, actually, I think that Wednesday, I think that's the 24th. No, it's Christmas Day. I don't know if are we gonna do anything Christmas Day? Because I know I'm gonna have some time with the kids.
I don't know. But I will figure it out what I can, and then we can talk about it more tomorrow if it's okay.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Because that way I can have time to look at the calendar tonight and write it out, so you can take a gander at it tomorrow if that sounds all right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go ahead and pray and close us out. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this incredible study that we had tonight. We thank you, Lord, for the abundance of light in great measure that you gave us and showed us what latter rain looks like. Lord, it was an incredible time, and it still is, to see all these things. And we thank you so much for helping us come to an understanding that helps us to be useful to the people around us. We thank you, Lord, for your love and wisdom and mercy and your dealings with us and your infinite patience to strive with us and to bring us all the way around to where we finally got here to understand this message. We thank you, Lord, for loving us enough to put us here to do this work. Lord, we're not worthy to be a part of the harvest of these incredible people that you've been preparing, but here we are. You chose us for some reason, because you love us so much and you have a work to do, and we ask that you just help us to work hard enough to be good, decent, or useful enough to do this work, Lord. We thank you for everyone who is here continuously striving and working hard to do whatever they can to draw closer to you and to be on the right side of the issue. Lord, you know our hearts. Bless our efforts and our endeavors to continue to grow and draw closer to you. There's still questions we have on different issues and topics, but you know, Lord, our hearts. Search them out. Show us every problem that we have in there that we need to get rid of, and help us, Lord, to be able to accept the message that's coming now in this dispensation that's already begun as a whisper and is growing slowly as time progresses. Our past dispensation was about 4 or 5 years long, but this one is all in the time span of 1 year, Lord. It is a short time period, and we ask that you please help us to get through it and to do whatever is necessary to be on the right side of the issue and to continue on to the next stage of our training. We thank you, Lord, for everything you do for us. We thank you for this beautiful Sabbath. We ask for a blessing tomorrow in our studies. And everyone who is driving here, we ask for driving mercies for them, Lord, to be safe and to get here safe and sound and to not have any problems. We thank you, Lord, so much. And we ask that you bless the teachers tomorrow that are going to teach our presentations, and and help us to continue to grow and draw closer to one another and working together to do your work. We thank you and we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.